Hey guys, Sandra here. Welcome to my channel. I feel like it's been forever since I put out a video. November was just really busy. You have the holidays, then you have holiday shopping beginning. NaNoWriMo is also November. To be honest with you, it was just like the worst writing month for me to date. I was just way too distracted and had way too many things going on. So it didn't pan out quite the way I had planned. I am still writing. I'm trying to at least edit and revise each day if I'm not writing. Maybe I'll do like a separate writing video how it's going, just progress updates on the 3 manuscripts that I'm currently working on. That's been kind of a side project that's been going on for a year and a half now. Having a lot of fun with that, so I'll do a separate video for that. But for this video, I wanted to go ahead and do a combined November wrap up and December TBR. Let's jump to it. The first book that I read in the month of November was Final Fantasy VII On the Way to a Smile. For those of you that are familiar with the Final Fantasy franchise, it's an RPG video game. The first one I ever played was, well, the first RPG I ever played was Chrono Trigger back on the Super Nintendo, but the first Final Fantasy game that I played was 7 on the PlayStation. And then 8, 9, 10, you know, I've played most of the Final Fantasies since then. What the franchise likes to do is publish these complementary books that go along with the series, and they kind of just enhance the world building and the backstory of characters and wrap up after the main gameplay is over. So Final Fantasy there is the Advent Children movie that came out several years ago, which kind of went over the aftermath of the Final Fantasy VII OG game. And so this book that I read, On the Way to a Smile, I think it took place during that same time period, so 2 years after the events of the video game. Each chapter kind of jumped to different characters' points of view. There's Nanaki or Red 13, there's Yuffie, Tifa, Barrett. There was just all different points of view, and I really enjoyed the book. It wasn't the best writing I've ever read, but I really liked it. There's another Final Fantasy VII book that I have, a Turk side story, so I plan on reading that in January, but I think I'm going to do, since I love stories, Final Fantasy VII is a really good story with really expansive world building and tragic villains and really compelling characters. So I feel like I'll do a Final Fantasy VII video, probably January or February. I'll keep you posted on that. So that was the first book that I read in November. The next book that I read was Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time, book 4, The Shadow Rising. I have some thoughts. I am going to record that video right after this one. So next Thursday, December 10th, look for kind of my video reaction recap for The Shadow Rising by Robert Jordan. I won't say anything else about that until then, so look out for it. Next 2 reads were part of their Vampire Academy, and then the second Vampire Academy book called Frostbite. Jess at Verity Books, she is like co-hosting this Vampire Academy read-along. There are other cool booktubers that are kind of participating and reading along with them. Rachel at Shipwrecked Library is one of those people. Vampire Academy is one that's just kind of always been on my radar, and I never sat down to read it. So when this read-along happened, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna join in. So it's been a really fun, quick read, not serious read for the month of November so far. I will link that read-along info down in the description box and the pertinent channels. Partake if you want. The next 3 books that I read in November were part of the Burning Glass trilogy by Catherine Purdy. Burning Glass was book 1, Crystal Blade was book 2, and then Burning Glass, Crystal Blade. Wow, I can't remember what the 3rd book is called. I was shocked at how much I enjoyed this book. If you are a YA fantasy reader, and if you're familiar with Leigh Bardugo's Shadow and Bone trilogy or Victoria Aveyard's fantasy Red Queen series, I think that you would enjoy Catherine Purdy's Burning Glass trilogy. Her prose is really beautiful. I was very struck by the quality of her writing and just how she put thoughts together and scenes And so I was very pleasantly surprised. I went into the trilogy with very low expectations. I bought the trilogy off of Book Outlet back in April. Really didn't have high hopes for it, especially because Goodreads doesn't rate it very highly, but I really loved it. So book one is very heavy on love triangle trope, if you're into that sort of thing. But if you read Red Queen and you're familiar with Mare Barrow's struggle between the two brothers, Maven, Kalor, and Cal, it's like that in this book, but way more complex. And the protagonist was really interesting to me because imagine if your superpower was having empathy, but you didn't have to touch anyone to be able to kind of know how they're feeling. But it was so overpowering that you're not sure if what you're feeling is actually your own feelings or if it's like the people around you. So the protagonist in Burning Glass, Sonia Petrova, she can walk into a room and she can literally feel other people's lust or desire, their hatred, they're depressed. If they have kind of murderous, violent intent, she can feel all of it and try and like pare down and figure out who is feeling that way. So it was very intriguing to me in that sense to tack onto that power. She can also kind of sense how the dead felt in their final moments if she comes into contact with their blood or bone or other organic matter. So it was very interesting in that sense. So the first book was her going off to live at the palace to be the aura seer for the emperor, basically to protect him and make sure people in his inner circle aren't trying to kill him. He has a brother as well. So it's kind of like her struggling with her feelings, if they're her feelings, between her and the two brothers. But then as the first book closes, it becomes much more about political ideologies, I guess. It is a monarchy, and it's this idea of democracy that starts coming, these themes of democracy that start coming out. And then books 2 and 3 were far less about the romantic aspect of it and more about the political intrigue and her power struggle and how that's evolving and devolving and just the challenges that she experiences with that and the losses in her personal life. Really good trilogy. I was very surprised. If that sounds like something that intrigues you, definitely pick it up and give it a read, because I am shocked that people sleep on Catherine Purdy. Probably one of my favorite reads of November. Finally, coming in at the very last of November, Holly Black released her How the King of Elfhame Learned to Hate Stories collection, which follows Carden Greenbrier, who is the Wicked King, the Cruel Prince in her Folk of the Air world. I loved it. The artwork by Ravina was gorgeous. I think I'm going to do a giveaway around this book, so stay tuned for details on that. But this book was such a pretty book. Like, the illustrations were just so unique, and I just love Holly Black's whimsical, dark storytelling. Everything just seems so, she makes everything just seem so light and fun, but there's always like this little underlying dark element to it, and I really enjoy it. It's a YA fantasy read. I liked it. So that's my November wrap up. I really didn't read a lot. I think it was like 8 books, but most of the books were 300 to 400 pages, which isn't long at all. The Shadow Rising was the biggest book by far that I read. Yeah, so it was kind of an easy month for me, and December probably will be as well. But on the topic of December, I will go ahead and kind of do my December TBR. So what happens is, toward the end of the year, my TBR gets dictated by what shows are rebooting for the next season or premiering or getting ready to premiere. So I like to try and get all of the books read before I watch the season or the show. First is going to be The Expanse, since the 5th season is launching on December 16th. I read the first 4 books a few years ago, and so I'm going to sit down and read books 5 and 6 here in the next week or two to try and get those in, because I hear that the 5th season of The Expanse is a combination of books 5 and 6. So gonna read those 2, Nemesis Games and, can't remember, Caliban's War, maybe? That's probably an earlier book that I'm thinking, so I'm just blinking today. I'm not on at all. And then I am currently reading a trilogy that I also got in a Book Outlet haul. First book is A Shadow Bright and Burning, and then book 2 is called A Poison Dark and Drowning, and then A Sorrow is like the 3rd one. So I'm reading this book right now. It's a really light read. The writing is okay. I think kind of the interactions between the characters is what's most enjoyable to me. There are a lot of just funny moments happening, but it's just about sorcerers, magicians, and there are these 7 ancients, which remind me of summons if you play video games. Final Fantasy in particular, you can summon these big monsters like Ifrit or Shiva. They're elemental powers like fire or ice, and they come do the dirty work for you. So there are ancients in this that kind of remind me of that, but more on the level of like kind of the 4 horsemen, I guess. Like one of them seems very plague, disease like. So it's kind of about sorcerers and magicians, and she's living in this house full of teenagers, but they're all guys. She's the only girl with the powers that she has, and there's a lot of like romantic interest between her and several of them, and yeah, it's a light read.
It's fine.
But yeah, so I'm gonna read that. I'm gonna read the first 2 Expanse books, and then I would like to, toward the end of the month, start on Mark Lawrence's Prince of Fools books. So the Red Queen Wars, that trilogy that he has, which is part of the same world as Broken Empire, or the Prince of Thorns was. I am most excited about that. I was also recently given an ARC for a book called Hall of Smoke. Long is the author's name. It's her debut fantasy novel. It's Viking themed and setting. The book cover looks really nice. It's about 400 or so pages. I'm kind of curious just to give it a read and see what I think about that. So I might do a video, but that book is going to be released, Hall of Smoke, in January. I will definitely let you know how that goes. This was a quick video. I'm going to jump into doing my Shadow Rising video review. Then I will get that posted next Thursday, December 10th. I hope you guys are fully recovered from your Thanksgiving comas and staying safe and healthy, and we are just weeks away from finally getting through this year. Okay, thank you for tuning in, and I will see you next week. Bye!